Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And I stumbled across a video in my feed by Tiger Fitness, and now that I looked at it, I haven't talked about Mark or Tiger Fitness in probably a year. I actually haven't even addressed it since the WFN fiasco, which you guys all remember. You guys all remember that? That was an interesting situation that probably going to continue on for years. We'll see what happens with it. But Mark did a video, came through my feed about Dorian Yates and one set training. Now, ironically, even though I don't like Mark and I don't get along, overall I thought his video was pretty decent and he made some good points, and I'm going to talk about those points. The only downside is, of course, that what does he have to do? He stops right in the middle of an informative video to advertise a supplement. Put one of his own supplement ads in the middle of the video, not something as a normal YouTube ad, but his own ad in the middle of it for supplements, trying to get those shekels, right? Got to get those shekels. But, where I'll at least give props is that the supplement he was selling was a vitamin D3 supplement, and that's one of the few supplements that actually do work, that is useful, that I actually recommend to people. Like, I tell people that 95% of supplements are complete garbage, they're completely useless, they don't do anything other than give you a placebo effect or take your money. D3 actually happens to be a useful supplement. So even though I can give him a little bit of a hard time for that, of just throwing a shameless ad in there, at least it was for something that actually works, which is more than you can say about a lot of the products that he does pimp. This one probably does work. It's vitamin D3. It's good stuff. It's one of the few things I actually recommend. So let's get to the point he made with the training. He was talking about a lot of people bringing up all this stuff from the bodybuilding world. And what I need to remind you guys, don't get your training information from the bodybuilding world. And I'm going to say with some actual credible experts in bodybuilding who have advanced degrees and coach people who are themselves bodybuilders or around it. I've kind of heard some of them say things even lately like, don't use the fact that someone is the biggest and the most massive bodybuilder as any sort of evidence that there's something special about their training, because that person is obviously on a lot of drugs. They're obviously very genetically gifted. They were going to be the biggest no matter what. Right? And you need to factor that in. That person, because of their genetics, their work ethic, their drug stack, combination of all three, because those things all matter. All three of those things matter. Your genetics matter, your work ethic matters, and your drug stack matters. They're all massive factors in how big somebody gets and how they look. Those are enormous factors. Those are probably the three biggest factors. They could have trained totally different and probably still been bigger than the other guys that they were bigger than, with a totally different training style. So that's a point that needs to be brought home. And let's talk about what Mark basically said about this, that he's trained with Dorian, he's seen what Dorian did, and it's something I said years ago. I brought this whole Dorian Yates thing up years ago. Anyone ever look at his actual routines? They're moderate volume. I wouldn't call them high volume. They're not low volume. They're not one set. He counts his volume work as warm-ups, right? He would count his volume work as warm-ups. Like, you would look at some of the rows, and he would be doing warm-ups, right? Like if he did 4 sets of, or like he did a set of 8 extended out beyond failure, right? That he could do 8 reps before hitting failure, and then he started doing extended sets and forced reps and rest pause and stuff for, say, a barbell row. It would be with something like 405, right? That's what he would do. Right? People say, well, that's one all-out set to failure with these extra methods to extend the set beyond failure used, except that he did his first 3 warm-ups of 405 also. So, let's be realistic here. 405 for a row. Hell, 315 for a row is monstrous. The guy is rowing over 100 pounds more than the vast majority of lifters could even do for 1 rep for his warm-ups. And it's the same weight he does for his final set. It's just not taken to failure, and he would call it a warm-up. That's 4 work sets with added work after failure at the end. Right? That's a lot of work. That's still 4 work sets for close to limit sets with 405 pounds. It'd be the same thing with his decline bench or his squats or leg presses or whatever else he would do. So let's say he would be doing his back and bicep work. It would end up being 4 sets of rows with 405 on it. Then he would do like some deadlifts, and it would be the same thing, ramp up sets on the deadlifts, right? Ramp up sets on the deadlifts, followed by curls doing the same thing. It ends up being like 12 total work sets, but in addition to the 12 work sets, the final set of each exercise would be extended out with like forced reps, rest pause training, drop sets, things like that, so that he could extend this set out. And one of the things that I'm going to point out the only thing I really disagreed with that Mark said when he was kind of pointing this out was that he said, well, it's ramping sets like powerlifters and other people do as warm-up work to get ready to prime yourself for the final set to reduce injury. I disagree. It doesn't reduce injury. And it's something I say all the time to people, and this has been a point of contention in the community that people don't like it when I say this. I don't think warm-ups reduce injuries. I think warm-up sets make you stronger. Right? Warm-up sets before you get to a heavy weight, a real limit set, help prime your nervous system. They help train the motor patterns. They make you stronger. Right? Warm-up sets make you stronger. They don't reduce injuries. I've seen not one single solitary shred of evidence that they've reduced injuries. And if you go back and use Dorian as an anecdote evidence, Dorian did do warm-up sets and then do limit sets, and he tore damn near every muscle in his body. The guy is probably the single most beat up, banged up bodybuilder there ever was, which if anything, is indicative of the fact that his training sucked. His training sucked. He didn't have proper fatigue management. He had continual overuse injuries. And he still did warm-up sets. Those warm-up sets didn't do anything to prevent his injuries. You want to avoid injuries? Manage your fatigue. You want to avoid injuries? Don't take sets to the bleeding edge, limit sets beyond failure. Don't miss reps with heavy weights. Going to failure is missing reps. All right, that's how you get hurt. And the reality is, it is about training volume. And people say, oh, you're just being lazy when you say don't train to absolute failure. No, it's not laziness. Some of the biggest, strongest men on earth, both drug-tested and undrug-tested, some of the biggest, strongest men on earth never train to failure on a regular basis. The anecdote shows that it's not only possible, but there's a split. There are people who train to failure and people who don't. Both groups are among the biggest and the strongest, both in the drug-tested and the non-drug-tested world in different disciplines, right? So you have both groups are successful, which suggests that going to failure doesn't actually matter, right? Because if people go to failure and someone else gets the same results and gets just as big and just as strong, not going to failure is kind of obvious that the going to failure wasn't their magic secret, was it? It can't be, because they would always be bigger and stronger than the other guy, right? That shouldn't be hard to figure out. You go look at the scientific literature, it says it doesn't matter also. It's kind of a moot point in terms of development. Quality reps are what matters. In other words, we know that your last 5 reps on any set, let's say you're going with a normal rep tempo, what does the research say? The last 5 reps within failure are the ones that stimulate muscle growth. So if you're working with a weight that's your 10 rep max, right? And this doesn't matter, I don't care whether you're a powerlifter, bodybuilder, just regular lifter, fitness enthusiast, this applies to you irrespective, because all those groups do 10 rep sets at some point. So that's a nice whatever number, right? I do 10 rep sets even for powerlifting. So if you're working with your 10 rep max, rep 6 and beyond has a training effect. That's what stimulates growth. What affects your total muscle growth and adaptation are how many quality reps you get. And I would say that those are your quality reps. Those last 5 reps when you reach a 10 rep max. Well, if you stop at 8 reps, you got 3 quality reps. If you had gone all the way to 10, you got 5. So people say, oh, well, you got 2 more quality reps. Yeah, but you could do a second set, right? You can do a second set of 7 reps and you still get 2 of those quality reps. You still got the 5. You get the exact same training response. You got 5 quality reps, 5 stimulating reps with the same weight. That's honestly what matters. That's your training volume. And when you're doing multiple sets and you're doing multiple exercises, that stuff starts to accumulate. I mean, take like what I did yesterday with my dynamic work. I did 12 doubles on the squat, 12 sets of squats. All right, that's 24 quality reps. That's total opposite of what these guys are talking about, one all-out set. No, I did 12 sets. Nothing to failure, but 12 quality reps, 12 quality sets of 2, 24 quality reps. I did like 11 singles on speed pulls with the sumo deadlift after, all right? That's 11 quality reps on that exercise. And that is how you have to look at it. It's all the same thing, and that's essentially what Mark said, that it's all the same thing. It is just about putting in the work. It is in. If he calls it putting in the work, I would say it has to do with how many quality reps do you get with a given amount of tension in a training session, in a training cycle, in a training week, a training month, because it accumulates over time. It's a cumulative effect. That's what matters. And what I would say is that when you look at the bodybuilding world in particular, because let's be very clear, you are not going to be a successful bodybuilder without abusing drugs. You're not going to be the best in the world, even in drug-tested natural bodybuilding, without abusing drugs. So it stands true either way, right? Let's throw aside any possibility otherwise. What happens when guys on lots of drugs do limit sets? They tear shit, right? Because their muscles are capable of generating more force. Your muscles tend to grow a little faster than your connective tissue when you start abusing these substances. Well, what happens when you start doing too many limit sets? You start tearing tendons off of bones. So, in all honesty, people who are going to be bodybuilders, and by definition means they're going to have to abuse drugs, and that includes Mark. Mark abused very copious amounts of drugs. I am friends with one of his former prep coaches, and I did see his drug stack from a number of years ago going into a contest. Mark abuses. All right, a perfect example. Mark's a big, strong guy. Don't get me wrong. Mark's strong. He trains hard. I'm not saying he doesn't. But the point is, if people are going to abuse drugs, they probably shouldn't do anything to failure. They just need to come in and do junk volume. They need to do what you would call for a natural junk volume. Tons of volume. That's what's going to work, because it's going to keep them from tearing stuff off the bone, and it's going to allow the drugs to maximize their growth without getting hurt. And that's just the reality of it. And I'm not endorsing that. I don't approve of it. I don't do it. I wouldn't necessarily coach anybody who's going to do it, because it's easy to make somebody big who's abusing drugs if they're genetically gifted. Just throw mindless volume at them. Nothing to, don't worry about failure. Mindless volume. Just pump everything. They'll be fine. They'll get massive. Give them lots of food, lots of training volume. It works. That's reality. But limit sets hurt them, as you saw with Dorian. Dorian got to where he was because he was abusing newer drugs that other people weren't willing to use. At the time, he was a lab experiment. Therefore, he got bigger, and then he marketed a revolutionary training system, which ironically, the guys today, now that drugs have gotten even more powerful and doses have gone up more, what's happened? They're bigger than him without using his magical system. So what does that tell you? It wasn't his magical system. It was the drugs. And his magical system, combined with a bunch of drugs, caused him to tear like 7 or 8 muscles and have to have multiple surgeries reattaching stuff in his body. It's garbage training. Garbage. Absolute garbage. And what Mark kind of said in there is like, look, he tells people, look, focus on the basics. And he called it his Big Five. And that's kind of interesting. It's almost identical to my Big Five. Only one exercise different, but his Big Five are the 5 exercises I have you focus on in my Novice Program 2.0. Exact same 5 exercises, literally the same exercises. Squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, pin leg row. I usually call your Big Five that you guys need to build a base on: squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, and weighted chin up or weighted pull up. Because I consider the row more of a supplemental lift for novices. I'd rather get someone, once they're a little stronger, I'd rather them be doing chin ups and pull ups. But a lot of novices just aren't strong enough to progress on those. And then he has you do whatever accessory work, kind of more or less what my Novice Program 2.0 is, right? Because it works. That sort of system works. Consistency, progressive overload, building a base on your big lifts. That's how most of you are going to get big. Adding accessory work and assistance work as needed towards your weak points and the stuff that needs more work. It's pretty straightforward. It really isn't that complicated. You just need a proven system of programming, and you need to be consistent. And that's what he said also. I'll actually agree with that. Mark is absolutely right in what he said in this video. Other than the point about warm-ups preventing injuries. I don't believe that they do. I think that they make you stronger, so they're a damn good idea. I would never skip warm-ups because they make you stronger on the work sets. I don't think they reduce injuries at all. I think fatigue management, I think paying attention to your connective tissue, and I think paying attention to your form and being careful of limit sets is how you avoid injury. I don't think warm-ups help. But you should do the warm-ups in order to get better performance. You'll get better workouts out of it. Get better stimulation, better performance on your limit sets. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.